everyone. It's August 19th, 2018. Welcome to episode 4 of Nema Outpost, a monthly Star Wars podcast. I'm one of your hosts, DJ.
And I'm Brittany.
And we are going to update you on all the fun stuff that's going on in the Star Wars universe.
Yes, because if you don't know, episode 9 started filming this month. So we've got not actually a whole lot on episode 9, which is kind of depressing for me.
We've gotten a couple Twitter pictures, and that's about it.
A couple of very blurry, very from the distance, like Twitter pictures.
Unfocused Twitter pictures.
Deliberately unfocused Twitter pictures, just like J.J. Abrams loves. Just, keep building that mystery box.
Just to spark our fan base again.
Yeah, because, I can't wait to deal with that for another year. That's going to be fun.
Oh, yes, it will be. We'll be doing this every month.
Yes, very true. All right, so we're going to start off with our news. We actually got quite a bit of news. And the first of it is that the novelization for Solo, A Star Wars Story, is going to be released on September 4th. Now, this was kind of news because they kind of buried it. Like, they never was like, oh yeah, the novelization's coming out. I think people were questioning, and I know I was questioning, is it even coming out? Because they never announced it. The Force Awakens one came out, I think, the day after the movie came out. Last Jedi came out a few months after. And then Solo, I guess they're just like, well, we just should push the novelization out. But
is that, we're talking about pushing out novelizations of spin-offs. This kind of runs into a different story.
They did it with Rogue One.
They did the same thing with Rogue One. They kind of pushed that novelization off to the side.
No, well, they had actually like a prequel to Rogue One novelization, and they had the novelization. And they actually do have the prequel to Solo novelization. Right, yeah. But this one, I think, because the movie didn't do so well, they were just, like, kind of pushed it under. As far as I know, they didn't make any formal announcements. Like, they made announcements for the big ones for Force Awakens and Last Jedi months in advance. And we knew when that was going to come out and what the cover art was going to be. This was sort of kind of like a last-minute thing. So
you think it's more of just because these are the spin-offs, and this is what's going to be going forward with spin-offs?
I think I don't think it's so much of the spin-offs, because I think that they kind of pushed Rogue One. I just think because Solo didn't do so well, Disney wants to just sort of go past it and just be like, all right, we're pushing this out quietly, and we're just going to focus on 9. Because, they got a lot of bad press for Solo, which I don't think was deserved, to be quite honest. We talked about Solo, obviously, on our first podcast. We liked it, and I don't think that the hate for it was deserved, but that's neither here nor there,
I think time will heal that.
I think so too. I think a lot of the backlash for Solo was because of Last Jedi, and once people kind of get over that, if they ever do get over that, they'll look at Solo in a different way. Just like there's this trend now that people are suddenly liking the prequels.
Yeah, it's a...
Which is a weird thing. I'm like, I don't know if
it's the typical counterculture thing. We've been hating on the prequels as Star Wars fans since the moment they came out. And now it's been digested for about 15 years. A little bit less. And now a new generation is being brought up. We were the child generation.
Yeah.
To date ourselves a little bit. We were of the child generation when the prequels came out.
Unfortunately, the prequel is our trilogy. So.
Yeah, it's our childhood trilogy. And now we're adults dealing with the new trilogy. And so I think some people have that childhood, like, oh, I grew up with the prequels, so these are the movies that mean a lot to me. And they kind of are blind to the unfortunate
right. I wonder,
problems with them.
I wonder if it'll be the same way in like 10, 15 years from now when 9's done. If people will come around to the sequel trilogy.
You have all these people that are against it, and I get it, but like most movies, you don't really... Well, especially with this, I shouldn't say like most movies. We don't know the ending, so we're judging it based on parts of a story. We don't know how it ends. Now, I know people don't like what we've seen with the first 2 parts, but maybe when they see the ending, they'll see the complete story and understand it.
Yeah, it's hard to judge the story right now because we have 2 pieces of the puzzle. And at least with the prequels, they were kind of universally disliked by critics. Like, it wasn't just like an audience thing. Like, critics didn't like it. Critics like the sequel trilogy.
What are you talking about? The critics like the prequels. Didn't Roger Ebert give it 2.5 stars for Phantom Menace?
Compared to the other ones, like, I think Revenge of the Sith got like in the 80s. And then the other 2 are lower.
Well, okay, we grade movies differently in this generation now. We have something called Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's like in the 80s.
Right. Well, wait, what are we talking about?
Revenge
prequels?
of the Sith, yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's a perspective. You're looking back on that movie. movies come out today, present time, and they get rated early by the press, and they go on Rotten Tomatoes where we see the score before the movie's released. To go back and look at an old movie's Rotten Tomatoes score is kind of inconsequential.
To be honest, like, when I look at Rotten Tomato scores, I don't ever really let it influence me all that much, and especially, like, I know people made a big deal, like, of the audience score in Last Jedi tanking. I'm like, I don't ever take what the audience says into account, because people are unreliable.
There's only one time I did that, and this is completely unrelated. When Batman v Superman came out...
Oh, we just hate watched that. That was fun.
Right, but the thing is, originally my thought was, I'm not going to see this, because I thought it would be, boring. Yeah. But then I see the scores and how bad they are, I'm like, this might actually be funny. And it was.
Now,
if
guys,
you want to laugh, watch the movie.
Right, if you want to see a real movie that has really poor character development, go watch Batman v Superman. And
that's the only DC plug they'll ever get on this show.
Yes.
Next story.
The next story is also related to Solo, and that is that the DVD is coming out September 25th, and the digital version is coming out September 14th. So I'm not a digital person. I like to actually have the hard copies of the movies, and I'm going to get it and add it to my shelf, my collection of Star Wars Blu-rays.
But both versions will have 8 deleted scenes and 10 pieces of bonus material.
So this is the bonus material that's going to be in it. So we have, I guess these are featurettes. We have Solo, the director and cast roundtable. So that's just with, like, Ron Howard and the stars just basically talking about making the film, which is something I enjoy, listening to because I'm a film nerd, so I like to know how things are made. Team Chewie, see what it takes to bring your favorite Wookiee to life in this lighthearted look behind the scenes. I think I'll skip that. I don't need that. Kasdan on Kasdan, iconic Star Wars screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan and son Jonathan share what it was like to write the movie script together. That could be interesting. As a fan of, I'm a writer, so I like to listen to other writers speak.
So they go through how they remade the Millennium Falcon in another piece, how they did the whole thing with Corellian escape, the train heist, to explore the challenge and thrills of creating this action-packed sequence.
Oh, this next one should be your
this
favorite.
This is the part that I will definitely skip. Becoming a droid, L3-37. Meet the newest droid and the talented actor who helps bring her to life. Yeah, but at the same time, the character lasted all of 10 significant minutes. Maybe.
Right.
Into the Maelstrom, the Kessel Run. Join Han and Chewie at the controls of the Millennium Falcon and see how a legendary moment in Star Wars history unfolds. Is that interactive?
I think it is, yeah.
And then we have deleted scenes.
This first deleted scene, man. Proxima's den. If you don't remember Proxima, she was that giant white worm at the beginning of the movie that when I first saw it, it scared me because I was like, oh boy, this movie's going to be awful. Then it got better, but that scared me. Yeah, so
there's just some extended scenes of different battles and like Han and Chewie's fight. I don't know if that's necessarily needed. So
I wonder if this is stuff that Ron Howard shot or that Lord and Miller shot.
Ooh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Because if some of it's extended, did like Ron Howard shoot it in a different way and they used his take, or like whose take is it? Mm-hmm. Because I believe that some stuff of Lord and Miller had to end up in the movie. So I
think the beginning was. I think that whole Proxima stuff was more his style.
I think they probably reshot some of it, but I think it was like they based it on because they couldn't rewrite the script at that point. But yeah, so I think maybe some of these deleted scenes could be Lord and Miller, which would be kind of interesting. And they have this other one called the Millennium Falcon from Page to Park, an exclusive look at the history of the most famous ship in the galaxy, its origin and development, and how it will translate into one of the most anticipated expansions in Disneyland's history. So they're talking, of course, about the theme park Galaxy's Edge that's come to Disneyland and Disney World. So it should be interesting. I know I'm going to pick it up September 25th, and I will definitely, this is one I'll actually watch more, because I actually picked up Rogue One. I think I watched it once on DVD since I bought it. Yeah, so.
That's brave.
Well, no, we'll be watching it next year when we do our marathon. It's going to happen. Stay tuned for that, because that's going to be fun next year.
I'm just going to make note. You did save me that from last year. I'll expect you to save me from that again.
No, I'm not going through that hell alone again.
No, well,
see, okay.
Find somebody else.
Side note, I like to marathon all the movies before the next Saga film comes out. And last year, he made me watch Rogue One alone.
I made you do nothing.
Well,
you chose to watch that
because
movie.
It had to be watched, and you didn't watch it with me. So this year, you're watching it with me. You're watching all of them with me. We're sitting through all of them. Even Attack of the Clones, which is one I can't sit through. or sit through them.
If you'd like to make a comment on what alcohol goes best with Attack of the Clones, please leave it.
We're going to have drinking games and food to go with it. It's going to be fun. So,
okay.
But that's a long time away.
The next piece that we have is also spin-off movie-based, is that according to prequel great Ewan McGregor, that there has been no plans for an Obi-Wan Kenobi solo movie.
Right, and this article comes from Cinema Blend.
Thank you. The quote is, "There's no plans as such to do it, as far as I know. I've been asked this question for years and years. I'd be happy to do it. There must be a good story to tell as they're doing spin-offs. There's likely to be a good Obi-Wan between me and Alec Guinness."
So, I know that I think they're shelving the spin-offs for now because of Solo. And I think it's a good thing because I think there's so many other things you could do besides a spin-off.
What?
But to be honest, if there was one spin-off that everyone's interested in,
that was
the Obi-Wan spin-off.
That was the one they always talked about. But then again, isn't that Boba Fett one still floating out there?
I don't think so. I haven't heard anything about the Boba Fett one. I think what Disney's focusing on now, at least all their chatter, is focusing on Episode 9, the theme park, and the TV shows. Because I think they're still trying to figure out what to do with the movies after. And, like, we have the Rian Johnson trilogy, but they're still trying to figure it out. So we'll see what happens from there. But I think that for now, the spin-offs are shelved. All right, so speaking of the Star Wars TV shows, there's been some news to come out about the live-action TV show, which is being, I guess, produced by Jon Favreau, who directed first 2 Iron Man movies. And this one is saying from comicbook.com, is it? And they're reporting from Making Star Wars that the series will be set between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So I think that's a cool area to explore because most of, like, the Star Wars TV shows are, like, between the Clone Wars era or between, like, the prequel and the original trilogy era. I'd like to see a little more about, like, filling in the blanks of what happened between Jedi and
Well, now that we're going to
Awakens.
have a stopping point at 9, it would be nice to know what exactly was going on in the universe between Return and The Force Awakens.
And it's taking place on Mandalore. So, this is basically what the report from Making Star Wars says. This is the article from comicbook.com. It says, the report from Making Star Wars states that the series could be taking place 3 years after the destruction of the second Death Star and the death of the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. The series would be about Mandalore falling into a state of turmoil, with many parties working to restore the planet to its rightful place, with those effects reverberating across the galaxy. So, Mandalore is where Boba Fett's from, and if you watch the show Rebels, it's where the character Sabine Wren is from, which I've never watched Rebels, but I do know Mandalore kind of plays a big role in that. So, what do you think about the show? And the show is going to be on Disney's new streaming network, which comes out next year, I believe.
Hi. You asked me what my opinions on the show were. Well, to be perfectly honest, it really doesn't awake anything inside of me in terms of what's going to go on.
Would you watch it?
It depends. I mean, like, I didn't watch Rebels, but this is live action, right? So, and this is going to be on the streaming service, so it depends if I will buy the streaming service.
I'm buying the streaming service. It's Disney.
Yeah, but how much is it going to cost? Have they released that?
It can't be more than what, like, Netflix costs.
I would hope not, but now it's like, okay. Anyway, that's a whole separate discussion that I was about to get into. But, I mean, it could be interesting, but it really depends on what kind of characters you have and where you're... I mean, yeah, Mandalore sounds like a decent place to have has the show, but where you actually go from here, we'll see.
I mean... They are spending a lot on the show. They're spending $100 million. It's about 10 episodes, which I think is more miniseries length, which I'm fine with. Like, I don't want them to be too many episodes. I think miniseries is fine.
I think that makes it much more palatable. You can get your plot across quickly.
Right.
And that's really all you need to say. If it's not that critical of a storyline, now you could expand from there. But if you're really just telling a story on Mandalore, then really 10 episodes should do plenty.
Right.
But think about that, $100 million television show.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's incredibly expensive.
But, it's kind of a long time coming because I don't know if you remember, but before George Lucas sold off Star Wars, there had been, like, a long time in the works of him making a live action TV show. They actually wrote episodes, but it just stayed in development. Yeah, it stayed in development hell. It never actually happened. So this idea of a Star Wars live action show has been in development for a while, and I think it's actually really new territory for Star Wars, considering, it's done cartoons, it's done comics, it's done books, it's done movies. It hasn't done live action. It's like Star Trek, but opposite, where Star Trek started live action and went into all the other stuff.
Yeah, and thankfully you can say that Star Wars isn't just going at this sight unseen. I would imagine that the trial runs with cartoons like Clone Wars and Rebels, that going into live action television wouldn't that be that big of a step in terms of how to create episodes like that, you know what I mean?
Right, and I think that you have someone, behind the wheel who is competent. I mean, the Iron Man movies aren't bad, so...
No, they're good.
They're good, and I think he also did the new Jungle Book movie, which got, critical acclaim. Really? So I think that, it's in good hands. So I'm interested. I'll see it. I think I'm more interested in it than I am in, the cartoons, so... Yeah,
I would agree.
Speaking of the cartoon shows, the trailer for Star Wars Resistance came out. And
is that actually I didn't notice after watching it. It wasn't I guess I was so mind blown about this little cartoon. Was that Disney Channel, or was that on the streaming service as well?
It's a Disney Channel.
Okay,
but I'm sure it might end up on the streaming service.
I'm sure, but I'm just saying, I was like, it's not premiering on this new streaming service.
One thing I have to say is I liked the animation in it. I thought the animation was really different because, when you see, the Clone Wars and Rebel shows, it kind of gets boring seeing the CGI all the time. So it's kind of got more of this, almost anime painterly effect in a way, and I like that. I think it's more interesting, but I don't know.
Would you say it's comic book-esque?
Yeah.
That's what
I'd say it looks way more 2D, which I like.
Right.
But I don't know if I'd watch it. And I'm not saying it's...
It focuses on... doesn't focus on, but it's setting around Poe Dameron's crew and...
Which already has a strike against it when Poe's your main character.
But he's not your main character.
Well, he's in there.
He's the main character's superior. And at least from the trailer, the main character is... Did they name him?
I don't know if they did. If they did, I didn't really pay attention.
I didn't pay attention that closely. He's to find out whether some of the new recruits on his team are for or against the
Resistance. So, just so you guys know, this takes place before Force Awakens. And, it's Poe is in it. I think it's interesting that Poe is in all this supplemental stuff. He has his own comic book series. He's got this TV series. And I think that tells me, because, guys, he's not all that important in the movie. So it's
no, he's important. That's why he's being posted like this.
No, it's because he's not important.
He's important to a certain group.
To a certain group, but you got certain characters who are very prominent in the sequel trilogy who you have no supplemental material about. I'm talking about a certain Solo, who we have nothing else about, really. We have mentions of him.
Because that's your A storyline, and Poe's your C storyline.
Exactly. But to actually flip-flop back there, something I do want to see in the live-action show takes place between Jedi and Force Awakens, 3 years after Jedi. 3-year-old Ben Solo. Want to see it. I know it's not going to happen, but again.
It's on Mandalore. What the heck would he be doing there?
Leia and Han would be traversing the galaxy.
Together?
Maybe not together, but Han would, and maybe take Ben along with him.
No, he wouldn't. He didn't like his father. He's fighting
at that age, he did, okay? When he was a little kid, they got along. It was when he got older and Ben got more powerful that it was just
I still don't think he had a good relationship with his father.
I have to read some of the books, but apparently, Ben would walk around with the dice and wanted to be a pilot like his father, but Han was never really around all that much.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So why would Ben be in this?
I would just like to see, because we have nothing. Anytime Ben's mentioned any of the supplemental material, it's he was not in Bloodline, but he was mentioned in Bloodline, and Leia was wondering where he and Luke were, but they were never. There's been nothing that actually goes into his detail about him, and obviously it's for a reason. But
I know this doesn't help you, but just try to separate one of those last scenes from The Last Jedi, and that one child who Force grabs the broom. Just imagine that's Kylo.
No, it's not. Because the last shot of Kylo in that movie is heartbreaking. So I can't.
Yeah, but just take that one little moment, cut it out, paste it somewhere else, and just think that's Ben Solo. Poor farm boy, looking up at the two suns, sweeping away.
He wasn't looking up at two suns, it was nighttime.
I know. Just saying that's
No,
the classic. That's the classic look. That's what I meant. I didn't mean that he actually did that. The next story we have is regarding the streaming service and how certain movies that are currently on Netflix will be pulled at the end of the year. Those including Rogue One, The Last Jedi, and they mentioned Solo, which isn't on Netflix yet, but might be there just due to the agreement in a couple weeks or so.
Yeah.
So those movies will be pulled from Netflix, so watch them while you can. But they will be put on Disney's streaming service. Now, the problem with that, though, is that the other movies, such as the prequels and The Force Awakens, are currently in a deal with Turner, which is TNT and TBS, in order to show those movies on broadcast rights. Now, they have broadcast rights from the day of agreement, which is 2016 to 2024. Now, we would all expect that Disney is going to make a move since money is no object to them. They would like to probably buy out Turner. It's expected they will buy out Turner, but Turner's not going to let go very easily. I believe in this article that we have from Wired.com, from 2016 to 2024, you would expect Turner to want a big paycheck for this. They originally spent $275 million on this 8-year deal with Disney. So since money's no object to Disney, they'll probably buy out Turner, but that's yet to see what happens. I mean, that's quite expensive, but we'll see what happens there. Since the streaming service opens in 2019, it would be a big deal for Disney in order to get all these movies at one time.
It would be, especially if, obviously 9 comes out at the end of 2019, so to have that be on there, and then, like, the entire Skywalker saga plus the
couple spin-offs.
Yeah, a couple spin-offs to be on there. So, I mean, they'll probably get it. Disney usually gets what they want anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you've already spent $4 billion on the whole Star Wars universe, why would you even blink an eye in repaying Turner even in full price?
And Disney just bought out 20th Century Fox, right? Is it?
Yep.
Yep, so...
And that was fairly... not that expensive when you consider it.
I know.
What was the figure on that? It was like under $100 million,
yeah,
right?
I guess because...
This is Fox isn't really that much debt.
Yeah, so I'm like, Disney can get what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
They have the money to throw around.
So now we move on to the episode 9 portion of the program.
The best portion of the program.
Exactly. As of Friday, August 17th, CinemaBlend.com posted an article stated with the title, "One rumored Star Wars Episode 9 title that doesn't totally suck." Now, on Episode 2, we discussed...
of our show.
Yes, that's true. I should be clear when I'm saying episodes like that.
Not Attack of the Clones, trust me.
Yeah, we're not talking about Attack of the Clones. Episode 2 of Nema Outpost podcast, we discussed our Episode 9 predictions, and we finished that off with title predictions. It's not unsurprisingly, Brittany over here has seemed to have the leading title according to this article, which uses A New Order as the potential title of Episode 9.
Now, obviously, I'm not the one. I didn't complete, like, it wasn't like I was the only person to come up with this title. This has been popular on Tumblr, but I was one of the ones to be like, hey, this would be a good title. You know, like, one of the ones to come up with it.
Around the same time as some other individuals were also coming up with this, and that's when the grassroots movement really started.
Right. So, of course, the way things work in the fandom is that people on Tumblr come up with stuff a few months ago, and now Reddit's saying something, and when Reddit says something, then everybody picks it up. But this one's talking about how A New Order is gaining steam as a title, and pretty much for the reasons that we talked about in our predictions post, because the title is multi-layered. It could refer to the new Jedi Order, it could refer to the new government, and according to the article, this is what they're saying about the title. It says, A New Order echoes a subtitle that was given to the original Star Wars film, A New Hope, which gives some nice symmetry to the whole thing and feels like something the franchise would do. A new order in the galaxy could ultimately fulfill the new hope of the original film, giving the story a definitive conclusion. The thing is, I think it's great, and I think that A New Order is the best title, but I also think that now that it's out there, that's not going to be the title. Usually we get it wrong with titles.
Yeah, generally with fan stuff, I mean, with even any sort of predictions, we don't get it right.
And even this article says most of the rumors about the new titles have been wrong when it came to the last 2 entries in the trilogy. So, we haven't exactly had a great track record with that, but it just seems like when you're trying to name the final film in a series, you're kind of limited on what you want to do. And I could see them repeating like you have A New Hope, A New Order, just like they repeated Jedi with Return of the Jedi and Last Jedi. So I could see them definitely repeating that. But
we were just looking back in history in terms of what episode 8 was predicted to be called about. Well, let's see, when was this article posted? Cinema Blend again. This was posted.
It just says
1 year ago. The Forces of Destiny was the predicted title and the lead title at around the same time that we were talking. So
right, and the reason for that was because Disney trademarked a bunch of stuff for it, and people were like, okay, this must be the new movie title. Turned out it was the title of the shorts that they were doing. It didn't turn out to be the title, but
now we're not basing this off of
copyright
rumors. Yeah. It's just
pure speculation.
Yeah, so as I said before, I don't believe that there's really any big, I think A New Order would be a great name for it.
I think so too. I'm still sticking to it, even though I think now that it's gaining traction, it's not going to be the title. Because I feel like JJ will be like, oh, well, everybody thinks that. I'm not going to do it. Then again, he also said Khan was not going to be in Star Trek Into Darkness, and he was. We all knew it. So we'll see. Obviously, I think they'll probably announce the title end of this year, early next year.
Of course. Makes sense.
But we'll see then. But I'm still holding out that A New Order does make it because it'd be amazing. That's the title that I want. So, we'll see, but it's interesting to see, some speculation from Tumblr finally make its way to the mainstream, only I wish it was, credited to Tumblr, not just Reddit. Cool. Alright, so now for a special segment of our show. So, because, normally we'd probably reserve this for, episode 9, like rumors or leaks, but because we really don't have anything right now,
we had 2 blurry pictures,
which I mean, really I could get into speculation territory with it if I want to, but there's really nothing there.
Nothing that's already been said, because these pictures were posted like 3 weeks ago at this point.
And from what I've heard, a lot of like location shooting is going to go on in September, and when you're shooting in a set like they are now, it's on lockdown, so you're not going to get any leaks. But I think next month in September, once they start shooting on location, you can't control everything, and I think that's when leaks will come out, and we'll discuss those. But what we're going to talk about now is there are 2 metas that I wrote on Tumblr. I tend to do that a lot. I spent some time writing essays on Tumblr about Star Wars. Yes, I am a nerd. But I wrote this meta called Analyzing Love in Star Wars and How Reylo Will Break the Mold. And I have it in 2 parts. Part 1 was written earlier this year, and part 2 is written after Solo. So basically what I do in this meta is that I discuss the couples in the saga, and then talk about sort of what went wrong in those relationships and how ultimately Reylo will be different from those relationships. So, in the first part, I go through the couples Anadella, which is Anakin and Padme, Han and Leia, which is self-explanatory, and Luke and Mara. And, if you don't know who Mara is, I'll get into more details when we get to that part of it. But Mara Jade is Luke's wife in the old EU canon, which is now Legends and no longer canon. So, we're going to talk about that, and part 2 has Han and Kira. So, I think the best way to talk about it is just in, chronological order of the couples.
Right.
So...
Makes sense. So we are our first real romantic couple, and by romantic, I mean just, old-fashioned romantic in terms of Anakin and Padme.
Right, and so... I've said this before, and I know a lot of people on Tumblr agree with this whole idea that Reylo is the reverse Anadella. And the fact is, they're sort of going to be their opposite. A lot of things echo. They're having a lot of similarities in their storylines, but they're going to diverge. And that's sort of how I came up with this meta that I wrote, was because of it. So, basically, in Anadella, what I talk about is ultimately, and I've mentioned this to you before, how they don't really have anything in common to really give their relationship a foundation. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, what tears them apart is their love of power and not love of each other. So it's more so the fact that, as much as Anakin loves Padme, he ultimately chooses the power over her. And
because the power would save her.
Right. And it ends up becoming more of an excuse in the end to get the power. And then Padme, of course, chooses Anakin, or chooses the power over Anakin.
Her
the
political power.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I write here, I'm going to read some parts of it, because I think it's important to talk about Anadella if we're going to understand Reylo and why this relationship doesn't work and why Reylo is actually a healthier relationship and will work. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from what I wrote. So I said, chronologically, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala are the first Star Wars couple. However, like most relationships in Star Wars, the love story ends in tragedy. The primary reason for this is their diametrically opposed viewpoints. They are not equals, and at no time in the prequel trilogy are they ever really on the same page. In the end, they ultimately choose power and duty over relationship. But before we dive into that, we'll talk about the characters. So, what I notice about these characters is that right from the very start, they're on completely different sides. You got Anakin's this young kid on Tatooine who's a slave, and Padme is this still a young kid, but she's a queen, more mature. Very different viewpoints, very different perspectives on life, and that never really changes. Their roles may change, but their perspectives and...
It's still, from beginning to end, it's still the royalty and the slave boy. That doesn't change. Anakin's mindset through all three films doesn't really change from when he was a young boy. He still carries a lot of his slave life throughout his Jedi career, let's say.
Right, and it's not, I'm not saying because he was a slave and she was a queen that's why the relationship didn't work. When we get into Reylo, they're obviously on different, class,
but those things are not the reason for their attraction.
Right, so...
Those are actually reasons for their detraction.
What I get at in this meta is that at no point are Anakin and Padme on the same page. At no point are they like, yeah, we agree on this. Or at no point do we ever see them really have any common ground. What's the reason for their attraction to each other?
For example, just what comes to mind is that episode 2 discussion when they're sitting and having the picnic.
Yeah.
And they're talking about their political views, essentially, and how they're so diametrically different.
Right.
And just even then, they're still rolling around in the grass, having a good time because they're two good-looking people. But beyond that, there's no real evident reason for their attraction. It's less, feelings based and are on the same page. It's more Romeo and Juliet.
Right, and I mentioned in the meta that they're, from the very beginning, they're both on different pages. Phantom Menace, and then even Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones, Anakin's trying to become a Jedi, and is not allowed to love, and Padme is a queen turned senator who's fighting for the freedom of her people. They're never on the same page, and even when they get married in Revenge of the Sith, we sort of see conflict of he's friends... What was that?
Attack of the Clones.
Oh, they get married in Attack of the Clones, but they're married in...
Yeah, when they're actually married. Yeah.
We see in Revenge of the Sith that, Anakin's friends with Chancellor kind of supports what he's doing, and then Padme is against that, and she creates the rebellion, and so, again, they're not seeing eye to eye there, so... In order for a relationship like that to last, you need something to have, that they have in common.
Those differences are never even talked about. I mean, obviously couples can have differences, but the differences have to be known, discussed, and it's something that you both agree to, I guess, temper with. These differences are mentioned and kind of just put aside,
right?
And don't really manifest themselves until it's absolute, completely opposite sides.
Right, and the thing is, their love is more, like we said, based on physical attraction, and it's also kind of an obsessive love on Anakin's part, and I think it's it kind of has more of like this, I know it sounds weird, but like a mother-son dynamic. And I say that only because Anakin's very childish, especially in Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And he needs a guiding female hand to like take care of him.
Well, I was gonna say it's maybe not mother-son, but I was gonna say Padme fulfills two needs for him.
Right.
One, the fulfillment of having a motherly figure, like you said, and also a romantic figure, because I just don't think he actually understands what the differences of the two is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he left his mom when he was a young boy. And never really had a mother through his developmental stages, so he never had the understanding of what a woman actually in a relationship is.
Yeah, and we have Padme in Phantom Menace telling Anakin like, "Oh, I'll take care of you," and then he's obsessing over her Attack of the Clones, having dreams about her, and at the one point after he kills the Tusken Raiders after his mom dies, she's there to sort of comfort him. So it's very much this like. Padme's coming in there being the very maternal, comforting figure to Anakin. And I think he sees that as the love. And it grows into this obsession because he doesn't want to lose her like he lost his mother, because he needs that sort of love. So I think that's part of the dynamic of the relationship. But what I also wrote here is that we don't see any sort of foundational scenes. And so what I refer to about foundational scenes is anything that sort of builds the relationship. So in the films, in the first three, it's basically just them, as I say in my meta, in beautiful locales, kissing, confessing love, and talking about politics. The only real vulnerable moment is a one-sided one. Anakin has a nightmare, and Padme comforts him. And I guess you can count the scene where Anakin returns to Lars' homestead as vulnerable, and it would be if Anakin was not acting like a complete psychopath. They are both dressed in night clothes, suggesting intimacy, but again, it's all superficial. There's no real reason for them to love each other. And the love is really, again, just physical. And I think a lot of that is because just the writing in the prequel trilogy was bad, but the relationship was not built to last.
It was the star-crossed lovers relationship, but it really didn't make much sense when you consider the fact that she's a queen-turned-senator. She could have dated anyone.
Yeah.
Like, Anakin, you can almost understand. He's kind of locked into this very structured, even from slave to Jedi, it's still very structured, very linear about what you can do and you can't do. So the fact that he even met someone like Padme is something that he would obsess about. Whereas on the other hand, Queen Amidala could do whatever the heck she wants after the fact that she's not a queen anymore.
Right, and the relationship really develops into an obsession because. And really develops into this unhealthy, manipulative, lying relationship in Revenge of the Sith, because he lies right to her face. He's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't kill younglings. The Jedi are turning against us." Right on Mustafar, when she goes there and asks him, "Is it true?" he lies to her, and that's not the foundation for a healthy relationship. And you should be very open with your partner, and that's something we see in the Reylo dynamic. As much as people want to say that the scene in Last Jedi, where he told her who her parents were, was him manipulating, he never lied to her. And he even says it in The Force Awakens novelization during the interrogation scene. He's like, I would never lie to you. He's like, he has no reason to lie at that point. So that suggests a lot more about their relationship than Anakin and Padme. They weren't really truthful with each other a lot of the time. They were going behind each other's back. Padme with her allegiance to the Republic, and Anakin with killing the Jedi, and his partnership with the Chancellor. So there was a lot of manipulation there, and there really isn't that manipulation in Reylo. You don't see that there.
No.
And obviously we'll get more into the Reylo dynamic after we go through the couples, but that's just sort of something to think about. Alright, so the next couple that we're going to talk about, because I want to go in chronological order, is Han and Qi'ra. So Han and Qi'ra appear in Solo, a Star Wars story. And actually, I really liked the dynamic between Han and Qi'ra, because it definitely mirrors the Reylo dynamic, but kind of takes it in a different direction in the end. The roles are reversed, where it's like Qi'ra is Kylo, and Han is Rey, and it sort of echoes Reylo, but it also does have its own problems in the relationship, which is why it doesn't last. So this is what I wrote at the beginning of the meta. When we first meet Han and Kira at the beginning of Solo, they are idealistic teens who are struggling to survive in the slums of Corellia. Han is a street-smart con artist and Kira a clever criminal who understands how the game works. Together they make quite the pair. There is an innocence to their relationship. Though they may be living as criminals on the mean streets of Corellia, they find companionship and solace with one another. Their bond is so strong that Han decides, after stealing a vial of coaxium, that he would rather use it to barter passage off the planet with Kira than to win the favor of Lady Proxima, his overlord. However, like many of the relationships in the Star Wars universe, Han and Kira's partnership takes a tragic turn when they are separated during their escape from Corellia. Han is able to leave Corellia while Kira is captured by Lady Proxima and eventually, under dubious and subtextually distressing circumstances, forced to work for Dryden Voss. And when they meet up again later, we sort of see that, again, they're not on the same page. So this is actually an interesting couple. And I think this is honestly the first time it happened in Star Wars where we have a couple that starts off as a couple.
Right.
They start off strong. You can honestly tell, even though they were young, there was real, I think, mutual affection between them. And they kind of started
And they worked well together, too.
Yeah, and they started off in the same area, too. They were both poor. They were both on the streets of Corellia doing crimes. And then, because of circumstances, they're pulled apart and they get into these different roles. And that's ultimately what really causes the divide in their relationship. But they're still, even though they're at these opposing sides, you know, Han's smuggler, Kira's working for, like, this mob boss character. And, you know, their paths do cross, you know, and even though they can't be together, there's still genuine affection for each other. And Kira does protect Han in the end.
Right. So,
I like this relationship way more than I like Anadella, because even though it does kind of take a tragic turn, you honestly believe, yeah, they have...
This was a relationship that could have worked if not for their separation.
Right, and the thing is, it's like, because of the experience, Kira grows more mature, and Han kind of still has the idealistic mentality the entire time.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't
like
think
when they first meet up, you see just in outfit, just in their how things have changed. How Han is still this, you know, run of the mill trying to get my dream complete, and Kira understands way too many things have happened for that dream to be complete.
Right, and the thing is, they sort of fall in the same trap that Anadella did, where it's like, in the end, they don't choose each other. They choose different paths. And even though their circumstances were different, where they were kind of forced to choose different paths in a way, whereas, like, Anakin chose to choke his pregnant wife, he didn't have to do it.
Yeah, good call on that one.
Yeah. Han and Kira are kind of forced apart, but Kira makes a conscious decision to be like, I'm not going with Han.
Right.
I'm taking this position of power. And again, her reason is different than Anakin. She's kind of in this position of subservience, so it's like this is her way to survive. And Han is like, well, his way to survive is to continue to smuggle and sort of be on the run and everything. So, you know, they're forced apart, and they don't choose each other, but, you know, it's because, yes, they do choose power and their own interests, but it's not really a selfish thing, it's more so like a survival.
Right, which is exactly why she, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert,
she kills Dryden Voss as a way to protect Han, but also to protect herself and assume power, because the only way she's going to get out of this is if she's in a powerful position. So their dynamic is definitely a little better, but again, they choose different people than each other. And when we get into Reylo, that's the big thing, is that, you know, in order for a relationship to work, they have to choose each other over everything else. So then the next relationship that we're going to talk about is Han and Leia. And Han and Leia, obviously, are probably, out of all the ships here, aside from Reylo, the more popular ships. Now, just like Anadella, you know, this couple starts off on different sides, you know. Leia is a princess, and Han is a smuggler, and, you know, that sort of gets in the way. They always bicker all the time, but they do find some common ground. I think more so in the fact that they're fighting this cause together, but I don't think it's really any sort of surprise that this relationship fell apart, was because they're always fighting, and as much as they love each other, they wanted different things. They wanted very different things. You know, Leia wanted to continue to serve to continue to fight for the Republic, Han just wanted to continue flying around with his best friend. So, as much as, like, they maybe found a common ground and they really did love each other, there wasn't enough there. They weren't selfless enough to be like, yeah.
To sacrifice what they had for each other.
And we see the result of that with their son and the toll that took on that whole relationship. So
even just as their relationship grows from what you see in the original trilogy, you would think that things would change in their lives, but they just couldn't escape who they really were.
No. And just like on Andela, there's no scenes where you really see them talking, about each other.
The only real scene you find concern about each other is at the end where Han gets upset because because of Luke, and you rather be with Luke. No, he's my brother.
Yeah, but that was more of a jealousy thing. It wasn't them finding common ground.
Oh no, not at all.
And I say my meta, like, they fought the Empire together and they complement each other's impulses. Like, she's calmer where he's more like of a hotshot.
Right.
And so they complement each other like that, but there's never like, what do they really have in common? Nothing really,
They had the rebellion.
Exactly. They had the war, and once that was over and they had their son, she continued to still serve. He continued to still do what they wanted to do. The thing that was keeping them together was like, we love each other and we have this son, but we can't always be together.
But they're on opposite sides of the spectrum.
Right.
He lives in the criminal world. She lives in the political world.
Yeah, and they mention in like the novelizations in Bloodline and in some other ones, it's like she talks about how she would like to sort of retire and go off with Han, but she couldn't really spend that long in the Millennium Falcon with him or spend that long in his presence because she knows that they'll fight with each other.
Right.
And honestly, I think that really what was keeping them together was Ben, but Han would be gone for months at a time. So as much as they loved each other, they were just too different for it to ever really work. And then when it fell apart, when Ben turned, then, there was really nothing there to sustain that relationship. And that's why they fell apart. So again, you can love each other, but if you don't have something in common and you don't choose each other, because Han and Leia made it clear, it's like, well, we choose our own interests over, our son and each other. So the next couple I'm going to talk about before we get to Reylo is Luke and Mara Jade. So this
is your area of expertise.
Yes. So Mara Jade is a character in the old EU, which is now Legends. So when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they sort of took all like the novels and the whole expanded universe and was like, all right, this doesn't count anymore. This is Legends. We're going to make our own canon. So Mara Jade was Luke's wife in the canon, and they actually had a son named Ben. So I'm going to read a little bit here about Mara Jade from my meta. So it said, Mara Jade was introduced in the novel Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. Upon its release in 1997, many people considered this novel, along with its two sequels, to be episodes 7, 8, 9. When we first meet Mara Jade, she's a skilled Force user working as an assassin for Emperor Palpatine. She is upset upon learning about his death and is determined to carry out the Emperor's final order, which is to kill Luke Skywalker. However, Luke and Mara end up working together, and Mara undergoes a transformation, becoming Luke's apprentice and then a master herself. Their marriage was so lauded by the Star Wars fandom because it was different from what had come before it. Here were two Force users, one dark and one light, who overcame their differences in order to be together. They created a new Jedi Order, which diverted from the old Jedi teachings and saved the galaxy. Though they initially were on opposing sides, they did not come together until they both grew and found their place in the universe. So, a very similar dynamic to Reylo.
I was going to say, does that sound familiar to anybody?
Exactly. So this is definitely, I think, one of the healthier relationships in Star Wars, and one of the most, ones on equal footing. Even though, yes, she worked for the Empire originally, she was a Force user, and they ended up coming and meeting in the middle, and she was never, I'm not saying she was, a gray Jedi, but she still had a temper. She still, dabbled a bit in the dark side, but she was able to find a balance in it. And funny enough, she wore all black all the time. Very similar dynamics between Reylo. So there's actually a quote that I found from Mara Jade, from this one comic that referred to their wedding, and this is what she says. When I first met Luke, I was under a compulsion to kill him. Generally not a good sign for a lasting relationship. Such was his courage that he did not run, did not strike me. He accepted me as no one else had before. kind of sounds familiar. When a certain couple first meets each other, one wants to kill the other, but then as they get to know each other, they end up really kind of, sticking by each other, which is what I assume is going to happen in 9 with Raylo. So I think that if we're going to look to where the Raylo relationship goes, we look to Luke and Mara as a stable, example of what Raylo could be.
Yeah, well, no, that makes perfect sense, and you would hope that's the way it goes, because every other relationship is kind of stunk. But it's that two sides coming together and compromising, which changes everything.
Right, and
you haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, exactly.
In the movies.
That's why it's so interesting, is like, Mara she was this former assassin who became a Force user, and, was trained by Luke. The two of them got together, created this new Jedi Order, had kids together, and really changed the galaxy together, which could be what Raylo becomes. So now we get into my favorite couple, Raylo. So, I know that there's other couples sort of developing in this, like Finn Rose, but they're not super important, so I'm not going to even focus on them.
They're not our main characters.
No. So the thing about Raylo is that it's clear from the beginning that these two are connected and that their destinies are intertwined. So even though that they kind of have class differences, like she's a scavenger, he's technically a prince and this powerful Force user, they end up kind of seeing past those differences and seeing into each other's mind. And they actually, we do see them share scenes with each other where they find common ground. That's what The Last Jedi was all about. There's just them kind of forcing to talk to each other and being like, yeah, they yelled at each other sometimes because,
Well, I mean, it really all is to go back where it started with when he's probing her mind,
mm-hmm.
and you get the idea, maybe this is actually confirmed or not, but you're getting the idea that he sees a lot of him in her, and that's sort of like her history he can sympathize with.
It's funny because it's funny you say that, because people say online all the time, a lot of things Kylo says to her refer to him. Like, literally, it's almost like he needs to practice what he preaches, because there's, in that interrogation scene, he says, like, it's hard for her to sleep at night, and she's got, like, all this turmoil, and it's like, could be talking about himself,
Right.
And then in The Last Jedi, he's like, you're looking for a father figure in Solo and Skywalker, and I'm like, he's doing the same thing. So he sees a lot of himself in her, and I think that's also why he kind of, not that he wants to destroy her, but like he's trying to fight that impulse of like, he sees too much of himself in her, and he doesn't really necessarily like what he sees. So I think that they're definitely a lot more equal than any of the other couples. They're equal in power.
Well, they're equal. They're equal not in their status, but they're equal in seeing each other and being diplomatic towards each other for the most part,
mm-hmm.
And in terms of their point of views.
And they both know what it's like to feel lonely and be abandoned by people. Rey obviously was sold by her parents, and Kylo was pretty much ignored by his family. And he went to Snoke because Snoke was the only one who showed interest in him. And then Rey is so quick to join Finn and all of them because they showed interest in her. And then when they're disappointed by like Luke and Snoke, they come together because they're like, wow, we have a lot in common. And we have scenes of them, and they literally say to each other, like, you're not alone, neither are you. They have each other's back, and this is the first time we see these characters fighting together, and we see how well that they work together. And even though everything goes to hell after they fight in The Last Jedi, we still see the potential there of, like, if these two can get their acts together, they can be a really powerful couple if they actually can stop being idiots for 5 seconds.
Well, that's what we'll see in the New Order.
I'm hoping it's the New Order. But I also think it's interesting that, like, one's associated with darkness, like darkness rises and light to meet it. He's darkness, she's light. But really, one can't exist without the other. And they do balance each other out. And I think that Raylo's going to take the best of all the relationships. They're going to take, like, the equality and the true love and balance of Luke and Mara's relationship, and bring that together, and the good pieces of the other relationship, and they're going to learn from the mistakes and be a couple that actually lasts because they're doing it the right way. So, and it's also the first one that becomes enemies to friends. Well, I mean, Luke and Mara do in a way as well, but the first on-screen couple that would be like enemies to
right, because it's less it's they still have their passion for what they love, but they also put that aside for each other. What we're predicting that we'll see.
Well, we even saw that in The Last Jedi. I mean, yeah, Kylo did assume the power for Snoke, but I think that was more of like a reaction to being like, okay, she rejected me, so all I have left is this.
Right.
He killed his master for her. She defied Luke for him. So they already chose each other. Yeah. It's just that they have to do it again on a bigger scale.
Yep.
But they already proved...
have it stick.
Yeah, and they already proved that, they choose each other. They care more about each other than they care about everything else. But just because they weren't ready then, they sort of, just like Han and Leia, went back to doing what they knew best.
Right.
The two of them went back to doing what they knew best. But they'll get there. The Force is pushing them together. The Force is like, hey guys, come on, I ship you. We're getting together. So
it's amazing how the Force has that much power.
I mean, it shows that, the Force, when they grabbed the Legacy Saber and it broke in half, it was sort of being like, we don't want you guys to fight. That's why this thing's breaking in half. So
no, you think that was not due to their strength?
I think it was partially due to their strength, but I also think definitely the Force is bringing them together. I don't necessarily buy the fact that Snoke started the bond, because after he dies, it's still there. So right. I think it's the Force being like, you two still need to be connected, and you two can't fight. And everything was great in the Force when they were holding hands and fighting together, because it's like, all right, great, this is what we wanted. But then when they try to fight each other, the Force is like, no, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
I think it's very significant that when they hold hands, the Force theme plays, being like, yeah, guys, this is like what I want to happen.
That's
so
true.
We're interested to see what happens in 9. I assume that it's going to be more of a Luke and Mara relationship where they end up happily together and where they're more on equal footing. I hope they don't take the tragic route. We'll see. We already had the tragedy in Last Jedi, so
we've had enough tragedy.
And we had their tragic moment in Last Jedi, so let's give them a happy moment.
I agree.
Alright, so that's it for this month's episode. So you can follow me on Tumblr, the 4i Jedi, and my blog is Darkness Rises and Light to Meet It. You can also follow us on Twitter at Nima Outpost Pod, and you can see us on YouTube and SoundCloud as well. Yes, that is correct. All those things are correct. Alright, so until next time, may the Force be with you, and...